We are live.
Yeah.
Thank you and welcome everyone um, to this first webinar in the webinar series hosted by the Journal of International Students titled Helping International Students Understand U.S. College Culture and Navigate the Support System. This is the title of the first webinar. Let me ask our guests and speakers to introduce themselves briefly. Please include your name, your institution, and your area of interest and any information or fun fact you'd like to share with us. I'm hoping that there'll be a few members of the audience who can join now. If not, they can log in and to YouTube and watch later on. So please introduce yourself.
Okay, I will go first. My name is Krishna Patel. I am currently teaching as a faculty at the University of Louisiana Monroe. And with the help of my colleagues, I was the one to start Journal of International Student about 8 years ago. And we are here today. And thank you for organizing the great event.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump right in, if that's okay. My name is Christina Yau, and I'm an assistant professor of higher education at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. My research areas include, it centers around student experiences and student learning with areas such as international education, teaching and learning, and graduate education. And I am happy to be here on our first ever webinar. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Lee. I'm assistant professor in school counseling at Wichita State University. And my research interests include the attitude towards seeking professional help among international students, and also the cultural region and a cross-cultural adaptation among the international students. Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me here.
And thank you. Finally, my name is Sam Sarma. I'm an assistant professor of writing and rhetoric at Stony Brook University, part of the State University of New York system. I specialize in writing in the disciplines international and cross-cultural communication and international students. I'm currently working on a project that is trying to document how graduate-level international students are supported by American universities, or rather not supported in many cases. So thank you very much for joining this conversation. We have another colleague, David Laus, who is trying to log in from, did you say Puerto Rico? Krishna, and he was trying to log in from Walmart, and let's see if he's successful. Otherwise, we'll continue this conversation. Before we go into the issue, let me share a few logistical notes. In this series of virtual conversations amongst scholars, academic service professionals, and international students themselves, we're planning to share ideas about how we currently support these students, how we can share and promote our best practices, and what professional development opportunities we can create for ourselves by having such conversations. In fact, there is a win-win situation, I believe, where we can benefit students and we can also benefit by getting to know each other and learn from each other. So in each webinar, we're planning to use a few questions just to frame the conversation informally. We will cover a variety of issues about supporting international students, including topics of teaching and service, research and scholarship, community engagement, and emerging challenges and opportunities. We will conduct these webinars roughly once a month during academic seasons. And I'm hoping that you guys can come back and join, or join this audience and promote with other colleagues so that we can continue the conversation. One quick note that I want to also add here is that we are running today's program basically as a pilot. As you know, we're already a few minutes late. We'll try to start on time in the future. But I want us to take notes about how we can further improve the conversation, the structure and organization, suggest new topics and that kind of thing for future sessions. If there are any members of the audience that are joining from YouTube at this time, I'd like to welcome you guys as well. Thank you very much for your time. Toward the end of this session, especially in the second half, after the half-hour point, I'd like you to please tweet your questions at JIStudents, that is JISTUDENTS, Journal of International Students, hashtag, so that Krishna can take those questions and field them to us and we can try to address them. And finally, we're using Google's free Hangout on air. So at the end of this conversation, Google will automatically upload our conversation to YouTube so other people can watch it in the future, unless we have any real concern for not sharing it online. But I do hope that you all will be okay sharing these conversations online, so a few other people can listen to them in the future. Let's get started. Let me start with the first question by floating the first question, which is, what are the common issues and challenges that we have seen international students often experience? Maybe if we were international students in the past, we can start with that, or we can start by sharing some of the challenges that we see our students facing now, especially challenges related to American academic and college culture. What are the gaps in our support systems and in our discourse? So I have a two-part question: what are the challenges the students face, and what are the gaps that in our scholarship, so that we can also begin to address them? Who wants to go first? Anyone, please jump in.
I think I can start.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Say it first.
Oh, okay. I think for me, so I am not an international student. I was born and raised here in the United States. But my parents are from Hong Kong. And so my first exposure to international students was actually my mom. She was a Chinese international student. Oh, now it's going to be probably a little over 40 years ago to the United States from Hong Kong. And I remember growing up and hearing stories that she would share about her experiences, that she was the very first international student at her university. And although she was educated at an English-speaking school in Hong Kong, coming here, there was still a language barrier, especially with some of the slang and the colloquial terms and everything. And also talked about some of the challenges that she had of not really understanding the culture and not feeling that she was necessarily really accepted, or that there was a lot of effort put forth to help her with that adjustment. And so what struck me is several years ago, before I started my study on the sense of belonging of Chinese international students, was that I was noticing that around the university I was at, is that a lot of the international students seem to be having the exact same experience that my mom had probably over 40 years ago. And to me, that was pretty alarming. And so I think a lot of the issues that we saw that were happening in the past that my mom would share with me are things that we still see today. And things such as, different learning styles in the classroom, feeling like not being very welcomed in U.S. culture, or a lot of the stereotypes that are being kind of imposed on the populations and everything. And I think another big issue that we do here in the United States is that we like to group international students all into one group. But what we know is that the experiences of students, say, from Canada are very different than our students who come here from China, right? And so there's differences in language, differences in religion and culture, and just different experiences and everything. And so I think for us, being here in the U.S., I think one of our major gaps that we have is that we like to put everybody together into one lump and to say, oh, all of our international students are going through these problems, or they have these experiences and everything, and they all, and the responsibility for serving our international students often falls on the International Student Services offices on college campuses. And so I think we need to really think about, how do we disaggregate the population, and how do we think about how all parts of the campus, whether it's in the academic parts or whether it's student services or student affairs, how can we better support the unique needs of the different student populations?
Jason, what were you gonna say? Your mic is muted. So yeah, it's good now.
Go ahead. I'm teaching counseling, and also my background focuses on the mental health and the psychological well-being, especially for the other population. But my research focuses on the international student. And based on my research, I found that the most international students, especially from the Asian countries, they are not reluctant to seeking professional counseling help when they have some problem. So we know, like, based on research, the most international students, they will have like adaptive issues based on the various series. They probably have a culturative stress. So that will cause them to have some mental health problems, like depression, anxiety, something like that. But when they have such a problem, they're not really willing to seek help from the American counselors on campus. They provide the free counseling for the other students, but for the international students, like from like Chinese international students, some other students, they just say, hey, I don't want to need help. I want just I'm keeping my problem, I want to solve my problem on my own. So I think that's the biggest gap from my perspective and from that my field. So I think so as a school counselor, a counselor educator, and I think a professor, I advocate that. So I think we can provide the more, like the students know the importance of the seeking the help when they have the problem, and they should know there is a counseling center on campus. They can provide the free counseling. So that's what I want to do. That's what my interesting to do. I mean, to help the international students. Yeah. So that's my point.
Along with the line of the David and Christina, I think you guys, focus on the similar aspect that I was encountering myself as an international student, and now teaching with domestic and international students. I think one of the biggest issues is about the cultural differences, the educational differences, the international student experience back in their home countries and coming to the US. Most of my research are overall the college experience of international student, their classroom participation, off campus, on campus, other involvement, their engagement in the campus activities, in interacting with the other student and faculty, and how much they can contribute in learning in American classroom setting. So one of the differences that I noticed about the support services, when I was a student, I didn't know myself there were so many support services existed on campus, and I didn't know that from my faculty member or my advisors. Now, as a faculty, the issue that I see is that the many students do not know what are the support system they have on campus and where they can go and get benefit. First thing is not knowing. The second thing is about their previous background. Many of them grew up in British educational system, and they have different classroom strategies, more teacher-centered approach, more focus on the lectures, and they are coming from different assessment and grading system. And I was speaking with one of the Dutch student, and she was sharing me that the grading system is a scale 1 to 10. 10 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. And if we compare that in the US system, which is different, and for her, she said 10 is for the teacher and 9 for the guards, and then 8 is for the best student. So she was comparing herself the grade scale that she used to get back home. The other issue is definitely the language issue, but that may not be a big issue or the biggest concern in American classroom setting, because many of them sooner or later they understand. They may be not good at writing but good at listening or speaking, or the other way. So the language part, they can definitely achieve the skill, and then they can improve themselves. But the biggest concern is the educational differences in the resources that we have on campus, and sharing these things with the international students so they can get help and they can excel their studies.
I am going to add my own thoughts and experiences a little more later, but I'm really intrigued by the 3 different sets of ideas that you guys presented. So let me ask, trying to play the dual roles here as both a participant, speaker, and as a facilitator. Let me ask some follow-up questions of Christina. Christina, as you shared your mom's experience and told us that 40 years later on, same problems are still persistent, it's such a terrible thing. I know that in the language of economics, education is an unproductive cycle of trying to do the same thing to every generation. Meaning, educating one generation doesn't necessarily educate the next generation, as it happens in other cases of economic development, right? People are born ignorant. You have to start from 0, and so we have to educate new generations of teachers. Again, it's not as if after we train one generation of teachers, this next generation will be automatically informed about the international students. To some extent, this is the same is true for domestic students as well. But when it comes to international students, new issues become new again, as if you're weeding your backyard and the weed comes back every season. And so, on the one hand, it's not too surprising, but on the other hand, it is surprising and shocking, because a lot of people assume that those problems would have been gone after having 1 million students already, right? After having taught these students for a long, long time, after having established these services and conventions and scholarship and research. So I don't know, how would you address this fundamental problem of, teachers after 40 years and systems after 40 years not really being able to address the same challenges, which is, to use your word, it is shocking, isn't it? I think you said shocking.
Yeah, it is. And I think if I can come up with the solution to this, I would make a lot of money, and I would be able to, I would be very popular here in many of the institutions in the United States and other places too and everything. I think some of the issue when I think about it is that, well, one, I think there is a lot of attention given to the international student population in the United States, right? I mean, the fact that there is a whole journal that is dedicated to international students, not only in the United States, it's for everywhere, but if you look through the journal, a lot of it tends to be in the U.S. or in Western countries, which is where a lot of international students tend to go. So there is a lot of attention given to that. I think some of the problem, when I really think about this is, and I think about the language and what people say and what the expectations are of international students, is that there's an expectation that international students adapt to U.S. culture and completely change to be able to fit in. When you look at literature, when you hear what people are saying and what the priorities are, a lot of the priorities, what they say is that, oh, we're concerned about international students and their integration to the United States. We want to integrate them to campus, we want to integrate them to U.S. society, we have to integrate them. And what we know about integration, right, is that integration, it causes a form of cultural suicide. To integrate with somebody else into a dominant culture means you have to leave a little part of yourself behind, and you lose a part of yourself. And so for me, I am not a proponent of integration, and I think we need to think about what are things that we can help students adjust, what are ways that we can help students develop a sense of belonging. I think we also need to think about how do we do things here in the U.S. when we learn to teach. Well, first of all, a lot of us, we don't necessarily really learn to teach, right? We teach the way that we know how to teach. And here in the U.S. as faculty, whether you came here as an international faculty member or as an international doctoral student, you become socialized into the norms of U.S. higher education. And so, we learn very okay, this is how we teach, this is how we do it. We do a lot of group work, or we value a lot of independence in the classroom, which maybe that's not the way that all of our students have been educated in the past and everything. And so I think we need to really reconsider what are these norms that we have and how do we kind of fight against that? And how do we adapt or not adapt to it? So.
In other words, instead of simply assimilating and adapting students, I think we should take advantage of what they bring. And this is an obvious point, but the thing is, to the education system here is not an obvious point yet. It is an add-on. What international students bring here is an add-on. Instead of looking at the university as a crossroads of cultures and epistemologies, we look at the university as a melting pot.
Exactly.
Even though the society has stopped being a melting pot, it has become a salad bowl. I think the university is one step behind. It's still in the melting pot assumptions.
Yep. Well, and not just a melting pot, but a melting pot we expect you to melt into what we are, right? So you have to conform to our mold and everything. So I think that's where there's a lot of that tension, a lot of the troubles that happen.
Well, these are fundamental issues, and I think these are very hard. The change is very hard to bring about. But the related issue that Jason brought up is that the students, the students have a tremendous amount of need in terms of support with their stress and acculturation and stress, especially in the beginning when they don't understand how to navigate the system. But then the faculty members, I don't know if many faculty members send international students to the right type of support systems. Like Krishna said, that sometimes a lot of students don't know, and the faculty don't seem to try to connect, don't seem to understand when international students are going through stress. I think a lot of faculty members just assume that international students don't need those kinds of services. They're just resilient. There's this positive stereotyping of how resilient they are, don't you think?
I totally agree with you guys. I think it's very interesting because we can talk about through the John Barry's the strategy series. So from the university, they're expecting all the students will become the fit-in or integration mode, but actually based on our research, we turn out to be the most Asian students. I mean, they choose to the separation mode, separation strategy. They don't want to get involved with the culture, the local culture. They want to keep their own cultural identity. So that's very interesting. Yeah. So there will be the problem, like the culture and the university and professor and the staff on the campus say, hey, you should do as what I told you. But actually it turned out to be the most international students say, no, I don't want to do your way. I will do my way. So that is the problem.
Oh, okay. Continue, please. We couldn't hear you for a moment. No, unmute yourself. Unmute. Yeah, continue.
Oh, okay. I said is a bigger problem. Did you? Okay. Yeah.
No, repeat the last half minute because we lost it.
Oh, you lost my. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I feel like it's. Yeah. I feel like there are two different parts, like two different opinions, and from the university staff, faculty, and the administrator. They hope that the international student can be fit into this university, and they want their student become like to get involved is the melting point and choose the integration strategies and do as American students do. But actually, based on some research and literary review, we found that most of the international students, like especially for the Asian students, they like to keep their cultural identity. They don't want to get involved in American culture. They don't want to go to the bar and they just they don't want to learn English. Like they don't like to say, hey, I want to speak English. I want to read English. I want to everything will be English. No, they don't want to do that. They want to keep their own native language. And they're still when they came to the United States, but they still live in their cultural environment. They stay with their friend from the same country and just. It's completely different.
Yeah, so, I want to give you an analogy. The other day I was reading something on New York Times. I think it's a part of a blog where they wrote about Nepalese. We're from Kristen and I are from Nepal. Whether Nepalese food has become very popular. And I was thinking after reading that article, why don't people in education think the same way? That if a new type of food becomes popular in a city, then a lot of people can begin to take that, take advantage of that new taste. And maybe a few thousand people can have Nepalese food every once in a while, once a week, right? And then you can go to Vietnamese food, you can go to Korean food, you can go to food from other parts of the world, and everybody benefits by having the options of many different kinds of food, including food that you want because you grew up eating that, right? And so there's no harm in letting the Chinese students be Chinese in the way they read and write and learn and present, and then also allowing other students to learn from those Chinese students. But the model in university education is that, oh, if everybody doesn't read the same novel, if everybody doesn't believe the same way, if everybody doesn't think the same way, then actually, isn't the university designed for people to start thinking in different ways, to be able to navigate different epistemologies, different modes of thinking? And I think we need to flip the traditional understanding of why we are in the university, not to be indoctrinated into one particular discipline, one particular mode of thinking, one particular cultural worldview, but instead to be exposed to the world of new ideas and new perspectives and new questions and new findings. It's such a rich resource that these students bring, and it has become a cliche. A lot of times people just keep saying, and they write in journal articles, and they write in university policy, and they write in the university website. But when you go to the classroom, everybody's trying to indoctrinate. I mean, why this gap between practice and discourse? Why this gap between claim and work? Don't claim that multiple, worldviews and arguments and multiple sources of knowledge is good, and then go back to class and do the same thing. I guess we are unable to change ourselves. We live in our own comfort zone. Krishna, were you going to say something?
Yeah, reflecting back to the ideas you guys sharing, it looks like we know the thing, but when we go in a practice, something is missing somewhere. And depending on the number of students you have on campus, looks like the university policy, the administrators are looking into the issues and challenges, and they are developing some kind of policy, but it's just limits to a handbook or some kind of flyers, and when it comes to the time for implementation or practice, we don't see serious thing going on. For example, the colleges or the large scale university, they have a different kind of programs, seminar, workshop for their faculty for intercultural competence, cross cultural pedagogy or different thing. But that becomes just a one-time thing, and there are no systematic approach of assisting student, re-examining the needs of these students and faculty, and then in the redesigning the new program to address the needs of our today's students. They are different, as Christina earlier mentioned, that they are no longer the same international student. They come from multiple perspectives with the multiple social, cultural, linguistic background, and there is no such mechanism where we welcome all the ideas, all the views and perspective.
Yeah, we
And
will
also
international students as the new international student of today.
right. So what I was, in my research or in the campuses I have visited, there is no campus-wide, university-wide system to support to have this as a matter of concern for every faculty, because now no matter you are a business faculty or computer science or natural science, you have 1 or 2 international students in your class. This is not the problem of the Office of International Program or the recruiter or career or writing center. This is the common challenge issues, or we're having students in all discipline. So why don't we work together? Why don't we share the campus-wide, the events or the strategies to support the student?
Can I interrupt Krishna for a moment and invite other colleagues to build on what we are saying? I really want to change gear here. When we have this kind of conversation, because there are so many challenges, so many gaps, so many blind spots, so many the refusal to change that we notice all around, we tend to be overwhelmed by the gaps and the blind spots. Can I just ask us to change gear here and say, what are schools doing that are good, that are best practices, that let's start kind of brag about things that we do, or brag about things that our university get it right. Because I'm also thinking that in spite of all of these challenges, we may have observed a number of colleagues, a number of groups around us, a number of initiatives, any curriculum, any pedagogy, any university-wide initiative, if there are any. Let's see if we can come up with some good practices and then build on those practices and say what we can do even better. So what are some of the good practices that we have observed, and how could we add on to them? How could we build on them?
Well, the way I have seen, some campuses, those who have enough probably monetary resources or manpower, or the faculty get course release where there is a need or interest from the policy point of view. These colleges, universities, and that's mostly seen in the research universities, that they are building some support. At least they are collecting the resources and having a central location for the that could be on the website or the handbook, and hosting some workshop or training, providing training material to their faculty and staff. That's a new pattern I have seen, noticed in the school, where you have a more student, 5,000 or more students, and you have a support from the administrators to the faculty, or a sort of collaboration. And I see that some resources developing. But on the other hand, the small school, they are understaffed. Faculty do not have a course release or no budget. These schools are still struggling. But on the other hand, international student has become one of the best recruiting strategies to help our broken economy of the country. And instead of developing the resources, I see the focus is more recruiting student and changing the enrollment number. That's the focus I see mostly in the small colleges and universities, where the liberal arts colleges or the community colleges. But research universities, they are developing resources for their faculty, staff, and then the campus student population.
What do you guys think, Christina and Jason, about some good practices that you've seen?
Oh, okay. I'll jump in. Some of the good practices, I'll focus a little bit on pedagogy. And so in my program, we teach predominantly online classes with our graduate students, for our graduate students. And I think that what I've noticed is that I think online learning is actually pretty beneficial for international students, and for the reason of language, right? Is that sometimes we're in a face-to-face classroom when the professor or the instructor is standing in the front of the room and saying things or that there's a big discussion going on is that, you know, for many students where English is their second language, they literally have to sit there and they hear something in English, they have to think about it, you know, maybe in their native language, and they have to retranslate it back into English. And then by that point, the conversation has gone, you know, 5-10 minutes ahead and everything. And so it's difficult just to jump in that case. So I feel like with online teaching and learning, it's actually a very effective way to engage all students. And I found that when you think about flipped classrooms, I don't know if any of you are very familiar with that. I actually just did a research project about a year ago in Vietnam, and it was at a university that's a collaboration between Germany and Vietnam. All of the instruction is done by, almost all the instruction is done by German faculty that fly in for 2 weeks at a time and they teach. And the students are all Vietnamese students. And all of the instruction is done in English. And what I found interesting was that the students said that some of the most beneficial ways that their instructor taught them would follow what we would consider like the flipped method of classroom learning, is that the night before or the day before, they would get the PowerPoint, they would get websites, they would get links that would include what they're going to talk about the next day, include certain words, because these are technology and engineering programs that, you know, there are some very specific language that's used in these disciplines. They would get those ahead of time, and they were able to go back in the classroom the next day and feel like they were more prepared to go in and do this. And I think that's something that we want to really think about doing probably a little bit more in the United States. I think it's coming up. I think a lot of people are talking about flipped classrooms and trying to engage and starting to engage in it. But I think the more we can do that, I think the better we can do, because this is also a form of active learning that we know is effective for all students, whether they are international students or US-based students. So that's an area that I'm really interested in seeing us develop a little bit more when we talk about teaching and learning and being very inclusive in the classroom.
I see. One other approach that I have found very effective is to gradually sort of build faculty awareness about some of the unique challenges that international students face, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And so visiting 18, 19 universities over the last 2 years for a research project, I have observed that, you know, whatever campuses have a group, community, a network of faculty members and academic service providers who are getting together to share good ideas, have these sort of waves of good practices that go, you know, becoming more and more common across campus. And so these faculty groups and groups of professional service providers tend to influence each other and tend to make aware that traditional view of international students are not sufficient, that international students need specific types of additional support in and outside of the classroom. And next semester I'm planning, and I was actually trying to invite a colleague from my university who is interested in training an entire set of faculty members who teach a lot of international students in the first semester of their college experience, undergraduate college courses. And by training faculty, these kinds of networks are able to make a very big impact, because as Jason was saying earlier, as Christina and Krishna were saying earlier, when faculty become aware about the complexity and the challenges and the needs of the student body, training and retraining faculty members every generation can make a tremendous difference. And I think that is one of the best things that is beginning to happen in my university, and it's also about to happen more. How about you, Jason?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you guys. I mean, you provided very excellent suggestions. I like it. And I just jump in, like add something, my personal opinion. I think we can think about this from the two layers. The first layer we can think about from like an institution and administrator perspective. Like I'll go back to the first question we just asked. I think it's based on talking about like they're not knowing for the international student, they're not knowing there are many supporting the resources on the campus. And also I think for the university, they don't think like how they have no idea how they can help the international student. They just think about like we can bring them into the campus and then be fine. We give them some orientation, some type of orientation, that's okay. But I think actually it's not okay. So I think from the perspective of from like the university or college, we probably like provide some of the special courses for the international students. So let them know what they need to do for the first year, and to help them to get familiar with the the university, like supporting campus, I mean the academic, the many things, the teaching style, something like that. I think this is the first layer, and the second layer is I think it's individuals perspective. And for me, I can be I'm an assistant professor, so I think I can be a mentor for a couple of international students, and also I can get involved in some of the activities, campus activities are related to international students. For example, I can participate in the international student orientation, give them a lecture regarding how they can involve the campus, so what they need to be aware of, some of the rules, some policy, and some of the culture shock, something like that. That's my personal level. That's what I can do for a couple international students. So I think typically we can, for me, I just like to think from these two layers. For the first layer, it's hard for me to do that because I'm still just a faculty. But for the second one, I think this one I can do. And also another thing is like special for the JSS, the Journal of the International Students. So I think that we can invite more students, like more the college to publish the research, the studies regarding the international students. So to make the whole the cultures know the importance of international students.
Maybe just publish a few articles, do a special issue where we invite articles that simply describe what are the best practices on your campus.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to limit ourselves to traditional articles that demand research and that demand citation and such. I think, or maybe on the side of our publication on the website, we can begin to run a column, like a blog column, where people share best practices on their campus. But if we want to give people credit for writing, maybe we can do a special issue that bypasses the traditional research article technique and simply uses a new kind of publication where campus practices, best practices on campus is the focus of a special issue. And
I think that's a good
spread. We would be able to disseminate best practices very quickly.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And back to Jason's idea of the way you mentioned that, volunteering or going in the orientation program and sharing. I think that's the best way of utilizing the local resources. If every single campus colleges pull out their faculty member who have an international background, or those faculty, American faculty who are interested teaching, foreign students, if we bring these faculty members in our regular program and offer what happens to, what international students look like, what are their needs, how we can provide more support, or how we can train. If we volunteer ourselves in those events, probably we can bring a new change in our campus culture, definitely. That's what Sam and I started doing in last couple of years, speaking in local events to the international student, body, as well as the staff, a faculty member of the international program. The other thing is about the recent the trend I have seen is the service learning. Many colleges, they started taking international students in local programs, community services, and increasing the engagement of these students and creating awareness even in local community, which is, I think, excellent practice in higher education. And a couple of articles were published in the Journal of International Students and other outlets. So I guess some recent changes are taking place, but as we discussed earlier, these are not enough. Still, we are hammering the issues that we explore or earlier researcher discover and publish about 40, 50, or even 90 years ago. We are still struggling. We are going backward to those issues rather than having a new innovation, new ways of addressing these challenges.
Christina, would you like to add something? I would like us to cover the third question for the last 10 minutes or so. Do you have any other thoughts regarding best practices? Christina?
Sorry, I think my headphones went out for a minute. Anything else regarding best practices? I mean, I think when it comes down to it, I think a lot about how a lot of universities, with a lot of the stuff that's happening, around the country right now and everything, right, with a lot of the racial tensions and everything like that, and that there's a lot of emphasis on, we want to diversify, we want more diversity, and we want to, we want international students to feel comfortable, and we want them to come here. But the thing is, I don't know if we're that willing to deconstruct and decolonize how we do our own things. So, right? I mean, I think that's really what it is. Like, I mean, why? Like, what's the importance of having international students here in the U.S. is that there's that international exchange, definitely, but there's really a lot of that interest convergence coming to play here in the United States, that we get a lot of money, right, from like extra fees, from paying, going and,
3 times actually, yeah.
Yeah, and doing all that, and like even the fact that we say, oh, this brings more diversity to our campus, and it can help engage our students and everything. So there's a lot about the benefits coming for the United States and everything. But so I think, no matter what, I think we still kind of approach international student mobility to the U.S. With the framework and with the mindset of kind of being colonizers and everything. And I think that until we change our mindset, I'm not sure that we'll see that sweeping change that we know we need to see happen.
Yeah. So the third question that I was going to float for our discussion was, what role could faculty and even students play in strengthening the campus resources for international students? This is a question that came up in a tangential way earlier when Jason was saying that and Kristen was saying that we don't know that there are resources, that students don't know what resources there are. And the faculty sometimes don't know where to send their students, especially when it comes to international students. How could we make use of what already exists? I mean, it's easy to criticize what's not happening, but sometimes if we could make better use of what is already there, we kind of address this issue in different ways. But I was wondering if we could add on to what we discussed. How can we make make accessible, available what we already have?
Well, I will jump in. I think the first thing is we discussed earlier, maybe we have to pull out our resources and share our stories, how international students are doing. If they start in sharing their stories to their administrator or the faculty or the staff, then they become aware. Some of the things even our staff member faculty do not know, because some of them do not have an international exposure. So it's a learning process. It's not it's not a bad thing to learn from the international student. So I think creating awareness, having more productive, meaningful conversation with our faculty, staff, and students, that could be the one way. The second thing is the more involvement, more policy level. There should be a focus, a need to work together in a group of students and faculty, so all of us work together. And since this is one of the biggest revenue source, recently we know it's about $31 billion industry, and everyone wants to have more international students on campus, either for their mission of more diversity, more internationalization of higher education, or to have the a diverse campus community, whatever their mission or the needs. But still there are possibilities to mingle these student faculty and share their experiences. Either it could be in terms of the webinar or the workshop, or it could be in the writing reflections of the students. So that could be the one way. The other thing is the role of the both student, and then if we look from the domestic or international student, some of them really need to look outside the box. We simply think that we are international student, we expect more resources, but it's you are the one who need these resources, help. So you also need to go and ask for the help. Like Jason earlier mentioned, there are very few students who actually go for help seeking. They need the help, and they hesitate to stop by the counseling center or the writing center or use the library resources. You should also go beyond the box, outside the box, and see what is out there.
Krishna, it's one thing to say we should do that, but the thing is, like, I'm wondering if there is something that faculty members like us, international academic services, like the International Center or other places which have an international student specialist, if they somehow could have a feedback mechanism for students to share their feedbacks, their challenges, even their ideas and suggestions. I don't know if universities have a feedback mechanism it feels as if universities have these specializations, these silos where things are happening and students don't know. They're trying to promote, but then the faculty are not involved in that. I mean, insofar as academic challenges are, involved in the student challenges overall.
There may be, but I'm not aware. Christina or Jason may add more, but I'm not aware of such a system where we get the feedback or faculty are asked their views, opinions, particularly focusing on international student. I'm not aware of such thing on campus, or maybe happening at the research universities.
Yeah, let me share an analogy. I had to hospitalize my little kid while traveling in South Asia. And almost every day, there were a man and a woman, I think 2 women, who came upstairs to ask, how could we improve our service? What's your experience in the hospital so far? And I was wondering, wow, that's a lot of interest in getting a customer feedback. And I was wondering if a university would have some kind of mechanism which would really go out to find out on a yearly basis how the university's support mechanisms is serving international students' needs. I don't know. I mean, a lot of students hesitate to say anything to their faculty members because they're afraid that they'll come off as weak, come off as failing, right? And it doesn't seem to happen in the classroom. International students just keep their challenges to themselves when it comes to faculty, unless the faculty is sensitive, have an extra antenna to understand student challenges. The feedback mechanism, there may be that happens through the International Center where they are not afraid to share their challenges. In fact, they go to the International Center and share all of the challenges. I don't know if it goes anywhere. It'll be interesting to find out if, in spite of all of the good things that are provided to students, there are also ways to get the students' feedback as to how existing services are benefiting them or not.
I really like the idea, like a feedback system, but I'm not sure if there's a one. And also, I think there's a one, but it's not for the international students. It's for some some other students, like black students or some Latino students. But for the most international students, if they have the problem, or if they say, hey, I got this problem, I needed to solution, but they hesitated to ask. Mm-hmm. They hesitated to seek for help. So that's the key point. Another thing I like to add is I think that for the faculty, I think we need to promote the multicultural competence. So for the professors, they know how to help the international students, and also from the individual levels, we need to advocate for our students. Maybe we have we talk about that. Maybe we know some international students, because we're from the same country. Maybe we speak same language. Maybe we share some of the similar culture. But when they come to us, we can advocate for them. We can help them. That's, I think, what we can do. So it's kind of go back to the previous we're talking about, we call it the self-awareness. We sound like we need to promote self-awareness, especially from the international faculty. So we do first, and then we can have our colleague, they know what they can do for the international students.
When you mentioned use the word international faculty, I think we need to, stop hesitating to advocate for international students, and because there's a lot of other non-international local faculty members who are also, and the distinction is not always very clear. Like Christina, where does she belong? And she didn't grow up in a different country; she grew up here. And yet she is interested in international student support. And so I think we should stop making the distinction. But to the extent that we have this special, experience of going through that same thing, or seeing people close to us of going through that same process of transition, I think we should stop hesitating, call ourselves as international faculty, and say, hey, I know a thing or two that many other fellow professors may not know, and I'm willing to offer those. In fact, let me, not a shameless plug really, but I blog about these issues on my site, and I have addressed these issues a few times, and I have written extensively about international students in the classroom and outside of the classroom, undergraduate students, graduate students. And so in recent years, I found out that people are reading them and people are benefiting. But I've also started sort of promoting the blog and saying, hey, I actually have thought through this, and I have written extensively about this. And you can find probably 10 or 20 blog posts on the subject. I think it's very important that we actually stop hesitating and go out and make ourselves available and start educating people and sensitizing people about these challenges. Indeed.
I think another thing, if you don't mind jumping in, I think another thing we need to think about, especially as faculty, right? Whether we think about being faculty in the classroom or we're thinking as administrators who do some of the co-curricular pieces outside of the classroom, is that we talk a lot about what can we do and what do we need to do, and we're in the classroom and we're out there. We also need to think about what are ways that we can partner with students to help international students be more successful. And I think there's two specific ways. And one is, how do we partner with especially older students who might be like juniors and seniors who've made it there for at least a couple of years and have made, in that sense, they're successful at our universities, right? They've stayed there for a couple of years, and usually by the time they're juniors and seniors, they'll finish out. To help, what are ways that we can partner with them to better understand what are your success strategies, but also, can you come and be a TA in my class? Or can you come and help us out with when we plan our orientation, our trainings and things like that? So how can we get you involved? And especially if we think about, a lot of other societies, so like, for example, like Asian societies tend to be very collectivist, right? So if like an older students are coming to you and saying, hey, you should come do this, then some of the younger students or the newer students might say, okay, you're right, I'm gonna listen to you and I'm gonna kind of do what you recommend. And the other piece is also, how do we hire and how do we recruit international students to participate in different things? I think about, Michigan State University is where I did my doctoral work. And I know that there's a student group there. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's basically a sexual assault response team. And they actually specifically invited a Chinese international student to participate in that, because they realized that they're like, oh, sexual assault is happening on college campuses, and it happens with every single student demographic, whether you're an international student, you're a domestic student, whatever. So these things are happening, but a lot of the reports that they're getting are mostly from white domestic students. So they're thinking, what are better ways that we can get students to report these things, or even just to get them the counseling that they need? And so they specifically recruited an international student to be a part of their group, so she can get the training, that counseling training, and understand also the legal aspects of it, but also be able to be kind of their network into that community and stuff. So I think, yes, I think faculty, staff, we have a lot of work to do, but we also need to think about how do we get students to
Sorry, I'm so curious. Did you see a change after you did that? Like,
I don't know if I followed up a lot with them. It was more of a conversation. I would assume that they probably actually recruited more international students to participate, to kind of help out with some of the kind of be that bridge that gap a little bit, right? Because you think about, there might be some issues related to, confidentiality, and there's differences based on what country you might be from and everything too. So I think I would assume it's probably been relatively successful.
That's a great idea, because I have seen in my research while I was traveling around the country that whenever they hired international students as teaching assistants and tutors at the writing center, the dynamic completely changed. When an international student is running a writing group, the dissertation writing group becomes very different, because they can relate to each other's challenges. And also there's this whole emotional, cultural way in which we look at. I mean, you and I may not look at it that way, but then the students may actually, right? And so there's no denying that these kinds of group dynamics and identity dynamics are real.
Yes, yep, I agree 100%.
Yeah, that's the good point Christina has made, and that definitely helps, partnering students with each others, with those between the experience and new student. That definitely helps to maximize the benefits of campus resources. So that's a good point, Christina.
So we are kind of running out of time here, but I think we had a wonderful conversation, and definitely we didn't cover too many issues. There are so many things about international students, but there were enough thought-provoking, food for thought for my own thinking and my teaching. I've actually already kind of decided that I'm going to invite experienced international students to give a brown bag session in my department, just to see if that is possible, because that way both other students, junior students, and faculty can learn from the experiences and stories of the students. And if we could do one small thing at a time, I think we can change campus cultures and make a lot of people more aware than they already are. Okay, any last thoughts to wrap up the conversation?
It's a very good conversation. I really enjoy it.
Me too.
Me too. Yeah, this is the first one, and it's working. It's going well. And I was checking the Twitter account if we have any questions from our audience. So far, I didn't see any of them. I checked a couple of times, but
Take time. I mean, we're slowly building. I mean, as I said, this was a piloting. We were still in pilot mode, and we actually didn't notify a lot of people in good advance. And so it's not surprising that people may not have followed how we did the program. We're a little late starting too. Yeah, we can have a conversation offline once we stop the broadcast and see if we can improve the structure of the program. If there's anybody listening to us now and in the future, you are welcome to join these conversations. Please go to jistudents.org, the website where we will be posting information about future sessions. Thank you guys very much, and I'm gonna stop the broadcast with a million thanks here. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.